Hello everyone. Today we are going to look at how to write your introduction chapter in your research report. So this is the overall outlook today we are going to look at. So simply we are going to look at the introduction part at glance. What are the expectations? Then we are going to look at the content that you need to consider including into your introduction chapter. Then the example of an introduction chapter. Hope you remember that when we were discussing about the literature review chapter, basically how you should consider writing the literature review chapter, I said that the entire research process starts with reviewing the literature. So then basically we need to identify the literature gap at the end. Thereafter, we are going to craft our research problem. So this research problem is there in the introduction chapter. So at glance, let us look at what introduction chapter tells. Now simply, it basically tells about what the study is about. Simply, it introduces the research topic and the main issue being studied. Then you have to specifically tell about why the study is important. Here it says, explains the relevance of the topic and the importance of the problem or the gap it addresses. So simply you need to emphasize why this research problem is this much important in your introduction chapter. Then what the research wants to achieve, basically, you need to indicate your research questions and objectives followed by your research problem. Then where the study is focused. So usually it's describe the scope, what is the industry that you are going to consider for your research, and the location and the periods. Then who benefits from the study? Simply, this is the contribution that you are going to give based on the outcome of your research. So it should be to the existing literature and the existing theory as well as for the practice. And also, sometimes it may consist with what the study will and won't cover. So simply it's outline any limitations of the research. So this is an optional one where you can include this at the end of your conclusion chapter. And more importantly, your introduction chapter tells the summary and the roadmap. So simply you need to have a summary para telling these are the key points of this introduction chapter, and you need to clearly outline the roadmap of your research report, indicating in upcoming chapters you are going to discuss about these things likewise. So basically, these are the things that the introduction chapter tells to a reader. So simply it provides the importance of your research problem, and it basically consider about what you are trying to achieve and the benefits of your research outcome. Finally, the summary of the key points of your introduction chapter plus the roadmap to your entire research report. So let's look at the content of an introduction chapter in your research report. So basically you start writing introduction chapter first, although you start your research process by doing a significant literature review. So these are the possible subtopics comes under the research chapter. So here you can see first you need to introduce the background of the study where it specifically considered about the context and the general overview of your research. If relevant, you can bring some historical background with regard to your research. Then the literature insights, right? So some brief literature as well as some selective literature components which are needed for your background of the study to further justify your research problem or the study. That's what here it says, the justification of the study. What is the rationale of this study? Why you do this study? And also, you need to link your background of the study, the things that you are writing under your background of the study to the research problem. So the reader should want to understand once he or she is reading your background of the study, this researcher is going to talk about this research problem. That hint should be given by the background of the study. Then you need to clearly specify your research problem. Here it says clearly defines the main issue your research addresses. You need to specifically tell about your research problem, interpret the gap in knowledge or practice as a problem. It should be one para or two para, but it should be very specific. Once the reader is going to read your problem, he or she should understand it as a research problem. Then, based on your research problem, you are deriving your research questions and the objectives. So, here you can see the research questions are derived from the research problem, and it's simply the questions that your study seeks to answer. And if you look at the research objectives, yes, it's derived from the research questions and it lists the main objectives of the study. So, usually you may have a general objective or sometimes specific objectives in between 3 to 5 maximum. It's up to the researcher. And also, you need to provide the significance of the study, simply the importance. Here it says describes how the results will contribute to the knowledge or solve real world problems. Explain who will benefit from the study, scholars, policymakers, and practitioners. So simply you need to tell how the outcome of your research is going to contribute. So usually we are doing a research to give a contribution to a particular issue or a problem. So you need to tell who are the parties who can get benefit from this. And you need to clearly summarize the key findings from the introduction. Right. So you need to simply say this is the objective of the research based on the problem, and this is the importance of doing this research. Likewise, you need to highlight or summarize the key findings from the introduction. And finally, your introduction chapter should consist with the chapter organization, where you provide the direction for the next chapters. So take a look at an example on how to write an introduction. So this is just a guide, right? I have given certain hints on following topics, subtopics on how you write those subtopics, right? So basically, we know our research topic is from the beginning, it's the impact of debt financing on financial performance. So you can see this is the dependent variable, and this is your independent variable, and this is your sample listed manufacturing companies in Sri Lanka. So let's see how to write an introduction chapter simply based on this research topic. So as you can see, we had to start with the background of the study. Now I believe you have an idea about what you have to tell when it's come to your introduction chapter. So background of the study simply tells the importance of conducting this study. You may have a research problem, so you need to clearly specify why this research problem is this much important. You need to clearly specify it. So here you can see under the background of the study, it says debt financing is a common strategy used by companies to fund operations and expansions, but its effect on financial performance can vary widely across sectors. So these are the references. As I said continuously, your statements justification should be backed by references. And here this should be and AA 2023 and the other author's name. So here it says in manufacturing, capital intensity and operational risk make financial structuring particularly critical. In Sri Lanka, the manufacturing sector plays a vital role in economic development, yet faces challenges such as currency instability and fluctuations in input cost. So understanding how debt impacts financial performance in this context is essential for financial decision making. So this is the way that you have to start and continue your background of the study. So you need to specifically indicate the importance of conducting this research, and you need to, again, I'm saying, you need to specifically highlight the importance of your research problem when it's come to the background of the study. So our second subtopic is your research problem. Hope you remember that when we were discussing about the literature review chapter, we have identified the gap like this in our previous video. So you have to develop your research problem based on the gap that you have identified in your literature review. Accordingly, this is the way that you write your research problem. So you can compare these two. So here you can see it says, while global research has examined the link between debt financing and financial performance, sector specific insights for Sri Lankan manufacturing firms remain scarce or remains limited. So these are the authors who stated that. And the impact between debt financing on financial performance is not conclusive, which means you may have different impact, positive, negative, no impact, likewise. Existing studies often rely on outdated data and generalize across industries, limiting their reference relevance. Furthermore, economic shifts such as pandemic and currency depreciation are underexplored in relation to the corporate debt structures. So these gaps hinder firms from making informed capital structure decision. So this is the research problem which is developed based on the research gap identified by conducting your literature review. So this research problem specifically says this type of studies have been conducted, but not that much in the manufacturing sector. And also the impact between debt financing and financial performance is not conclusive. And also it says the manufacturing sector is impacted by several pandemics and all. So that is the research problem that you have to develop based on the literature review as the second subtopic in your introduction chapter. So then based on this research problem, we can develop our research question and research objective. So here you can see the research question is, what is the impact of debt financing on financial performance of listed manufacturing companies in Sri Lanka? Based on this research question, we can develop our research objective, that is to examine the impact of debt financing on the financial performance of listed manufacturing companies in Sri Lanka. So you can see the link. Based on the research problem, we are developing the questions and the research objective. So number 5, we need to look at the significance of the study, how we are going to contribute your outcome. It should be to the existing literature, it should be to the theories related with the study, and also it should be the practical significance. So you can see it says this study adds updated sector specific evidence on debt financing in Sri Lankan manufacturing sector. It fills a geographic and temporal gap by focusing on recent economic conditions and industry specific risk. So this is the contribution that you are going to give to the existing literature that is already available related with this topic. Right. So here what you are going to say, you are going to identify the economic changes and the specific industry concerns, and you are going to tell to the existing literature in the manufacturing sector, this is the situation. And let's look at the significance to the theory. It says the research contributes to the capital structure theory by testing its applicability in emerging market conditions. It provides empirical support for challenges to the theoretical model like Modiglian Miller and trade-off theory. You can even bring pecking order theory. So simply you should provide the contribution that you are going to give based on the outcome of your research to the theory related with your study. So finally, you need to tell how your research will contribute to the practical aspect. It says the findings guide manufacturing firms in optimizing debt strategies under volatile economic environment. So your outcome may be positive, negative, or no impact. Based on that, you are telling this is the contribution. It helps financial managers and policymakers to make informed decision tailored to Sri Lankan industrial context. So based on your outcome, you are going to tell, yes, this is the best. You should do these things. Likewise. The final two subtopics are the chapter summary and the chapter organization. So under chapter summary, you are bringing the key points in your introduction chapter. Here you can say it says, this chapter introduce the research topic, focusing on the impact of debt financing on financial performance in Sri Lankan manufacturing sector. So it outlined the research problem, questions, and objective guiding the study. Further, you are going to say the significance of the research to the literature, theory, and practice was explained. Very shortly, you are going to tell. Then you are going to tell to the reader about about the next chapters that you are going to discuss. It says the remaining chapters of this research report are organized as follows. Chapter 2 represents the literature review, covering the relevant theories and previous studies on this particular topic, and it highlights the literature gap. So the reader knows that in the next chapter, you are going to consider about this. Then the chapter 3, it is the research methodology. So we are going to include the conceptual framework, hypothesis, research design, data sources, and how we are going to analyze the data. And chapter 4 discusses the data analysis and the results derived from the study. So in here, you are going to interpret the results of your study, whether you achieve your objectives or not. And the chapter 5 is simply the discussion where you interpret the findings in relation to the existing literature and the theoretical framework. And finally, chapter 6 again consider about summarizing the key insights, limitations, and the recommendations. So let us discuss about these chapters in our future discussions. But for the moment, please note that this is the final subtopic of your introduction chapter. And here you need to tell to the reader that in the upcoming chapters, you are going to discuss these things. So the reader will read your research report with that mindset. He knows where he is going. So it's easy for them. So this is how you simply write your introduction chapter.